Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm actually honored to have this time to share with you some thoughts that I've written in the form of an essay um, on behalf of the Pontifical Catholic University of Ecuador. I'm going to address this talk on four main points. I'm going to start with the four digital communications phenomena during the pandemic. I'm going to give a brief
Dr. Albertina, we can only see a white screen. We cannot see your PowerPoint yet.
Okay. I'm sorry. Let me try again. Now?
Yes, you're okay now. We can see now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, so I'm focusing, as I was mentioning, on four key points. The first one is the four digital communications phenomena that I've identified during the pandemic. The second one is a brief framing about Jesus Christ as the great communicator. Then I'm going to talk a bit about empathy and how is it the key to handle post-pandemic digital communications, especially focused on social media. And then I'm going to share with you some thoughts about conclusions and recommendations. Well, when I talk about the communications environment during the pandemic, I could identify four phenomena during the peak of the pandemic. The first one is called infodemia. This name was coined by the World Health Organization, and it has to do with the overload of information which overcomes our capacity of managing it. You may say, but it's the same as infoxication. That is a phenomenon that we have already studied during the late 90s. The difference between infodemia and infoxication is that infodemia also implies the lack of capacity to identify valuable data and reliable sources rather than the ones that are not. A second phenomenon is called a hypersensitivity. It refers to the management of narratives in the intent of manipulations. It's some sort of polarization in which we talk about heroes and villains, the good and the evil, the conscious and the unconscious. If you remind when we were during the peak of the pandemics, the heroes were, of course, the doctors, the scientists, firemen, and the bad people were the ones who had to leave their homes to work, for example. And people referred to them as the people who were not respecting their own lives and other people's life. So it became a very polarized narrative. The third phenomenon we can talk about is the atypical cycles. It refers to the behavioral changes in the digital environment. For example, in 2020, social media presented 5 times more posting density than the usual. For example, in 2019, Twitter had an average of 500 million tweets a day. During the peak of the pandemic, it came up to 700 million tweets a day. Also, Google searches increased 100 times, and 60% of those Google searches were related to COVID and COVID-related keywords. And finally, we can talk about a fourth phenomenon, which is disinformation. This is what people usually call fake news. When we study this disinformation disorders, we try not to use this term fake news because it's not as simple as false information. It is called what we say information pathologies. Why? Because it may be true information in a false context. It may be false information in a true context, or even true information without context. So the point is that these information disorders may lead to invalid conclusions. it may start with misinformation, which may be false information, but believing that is true. Malinformation is based on reality, but with the intent of causing harm. But disinformation is this dissemination of false information with the intent of harming somebody else's reputation, of an institution reputation. This is why this communicational environment is so complex. In this framing, since I'm not an expert on religion, I'm just going to go very briefly through this framing about communication that Jesus is the great message. From the paradigm, Jesus offers a paradigm of communication practice when he refers to himself as the way, the truth, and the life. From the example perspective, we may say that Jesus demonstrated that he was a communicator through his missionary approaches, specializing in custom-made communication. And the cross message is Jesus is presenting all communications that seeks to carry his word to serve others. In this framework, I'm going to refer to what empathy is. I have some different definitions from different authors. I'm going to cite just a few. Melody Wilden say that empathy is the ability to detect others' emotions and understand their perspective. While Professor Brené Brown say it's feeling with the person, it's climbing down the hole to sit beside him, making yourself vulnerable to sincerely connect with them. If we take a Simon Sinek perspective, we may say that empathy is understanding the other people's feelings by putting yourself in their shoes and taking their perspective. I would like you to see now my slide on the screen. If I asked you who this character is, you may say it's Sadness, the popular character of the film Inside Out. And this blue little character is called Sadness. I would say that that character was myself in the year 2017. And let me share with you, and let me make the long story short. On the year 2015, I decided to move from my hometown in Ecuador to Central America in Guatemala for 5 years. 6 months after I moved, my father died. 3 months after he died, my aunt, my beloved aunt with whom I was raised with, died as well. And 1 year after my aunt died, my brother died unexpectedly as well. So in the period of 1 year and a half, I met 3 key people of my inner circle. And since I am a very active social media user, that sadness was reflected on my social media profiles. I understand the situation. I really don't know what to say, but please let me know if I can be helpful somehow. And that is really, really important in that point of time. So since I left that myself, I started to think, how could we be empathic in a digital environment? And I want to share with you 7 signs of empathic people in social media environments. The first one is to be fully present with others. And that implies to publish and to share content with a user perspective. Because sometimes in social media, we think about our own selves only, or our own institutional goals or objectives. And we actually miss the point of talking from the nature of each social media network, from each DNA, and understanding the environment. And being that said, for example, Facebook, it's supposed to be some sort of personal environment where I may share what I love to do, what I love what I have done during the weekend. So it's like you have to feel if you were receiving some guests in your home, in your living room. So it's more personal. You have to feel close to people. Twitter, on the contrary, is very informative. It's a global network to share breaking news or to share information. Instagram is more emotional, is where you feel more creative, you feel like a photographer, and you have to tell a story with an image. YouTube, for example, is very functional. When you need to know about something, you may follow tutorials or you may replace Netflix with YouTube. So you are actually looking for some entertainment or some how to do some things. And LinkedIn is the professional social network itself, where you present yourself and try to connect with people with whom you have something to share with in terms of professional interests. The second key I may identify of empathic people in social media is that we have to master the art of active listening. In the case of social media, please let me know if you can see now a tool I would like to share with you. Do you see the dashboard?
Not yet.
No?
Not yet, Professor.
Okay, let me share. There we go.
There, we could see it now.
Okay. These tools should be part of our daily social media management, especially if we if we speak on behalf of some institutions. These are called social listening tools. What is the information we get from these tools? First, we configure the tools with some keywords. For example, the number of your institution, the terms you are related with, the conversations you would like to engage with in social media. And first, you have the mentions that have been found in at least 13 digital platforms. Here we have what we call the sentiment, which is the attitude towards your publications, if they're either positive, neutral, or negative. Here you see the bubbles, so you see how the conversation is going on social media. So the bigger the circle is, the more impact it has. And if you can see, here we have some lines that tells me how that publication was amplified. So I can see whether we are facing a crisis or the good impact that a positive information may have had on our audiences. We also have information about the trending phrases related with our conversations of interest, the keywords, and also the trending negative phrases. So we can start, or we may design some strategies to balance that information. And we also have a map of influencers. So you may know who are the most active users engaged in certain conversations, in certain topics, and whether if they're positive or negative publication or posted related with your conversation. Here we also have some sort of a keyword mind map, and here we have also the hashtags. Here, finally, we have a map of emotions. So we can also tell if whether the conversation we would like to be engaged with is related with either anger, fear, trust, joy, etc. So this is very important if we are especially managing social media profiles. Am I back to my slides? Yes?
You are, Professor.
Thank you. In that context, a third key sign of empathic people on social media is also we can tune our communication into nonverbal signs. For example, Empathic people are aware that communications runs deeper than words alone. For example, when people tell me, eh, is it professional to use emojis or to use hashtags in an institutional communications from a digital, from a religious institutions? Of course it is. It's part of the communication. If you are not seeing the person face to face, emojis and hashtags give you some context that makes the conversation more vivid and more to make you feel closer. A fourth sign is to pause. Empathic people know how powerful silence can be. So we usually try not to interrupt when other people is talking about, but first to observe and then to engage into the conversation. But especially if you are speaking on behalf of an institution, please let people talk first, observe, and then try to see how your intervention might be useful in that context. A fifth sign is to replace giving advice with asking questions. Remember that when I felt so sad, I didn't expect people to tell me what to do. I only expected people to listen to me, to listen how sad I felt at that point in time. So I would have liked to feel questions such as, how do you feel about it? Can you tell me more? What would be helpful for you? What to make of it? That gives you the sense of these people is actually interested in my situations, and regardless they understand or not the situation. If you are also posting on behalf of an institution, I would recommend to speak in the terms of we rather in terms of me, because it's also important that you may feel as part of a community. We need a sense of belongingness, of belonging. We need to think we are part of a communication. And finally, the seventh key sign leads me to give you some final thoughts. The seventh sign is to imagine the other people's point of view, but not only from an intellectual approach, but from three key perspectives: to understand people's needs, people's fears, and people's hopes. Why is it important to take that perspective? Because if we understand the people's needs, fears, and hopes, we are able to connect with them. Why? Because if we understand their needs, we may support them. As the colleague was mentioning before, the chaplains had to support COVID patients and to understand their situations, their fears. They were about to die, and the chaplains were unblocking their fear and what they were experiencing at that time in time. And the hopes, we can encourage that. We can understand what might be your motivation in that specific point in time, and how may I help you feel better in the situation. And connecting with others finally means to start developing a storytelling, a narrative, which might have three key elements. A functional one, because the people need to feel they are being heard, or that there might be a solution, or there might be a positive scenario for them. That narrative also might imply an ethic dimension, because we're talking about values. When I felt so lonely, I felt really misrespected. So I didn't expect people to understand the situation, because they may have not lost a parent, an aunt, and a brother, but they may have at least respected the situation. And also, this narrative should be emotional because we are given support, because we have to be positive. We have to be positive but realistic. But people need to feel that we are not just a number, that we are a person, that we are a soul that is being heard. So to finalize my intervention, I would like to share with you three recommendations we have worked with in the digital desk at Cygnus about these changes that pandemic has brought to us. The first is regarding digital literacy. It's helping religious leaders to adopt a balanced disposition towards ICT. That's why your interventions have been so insightful and interesting for myself, because I can see a lot of examples of how priests, chaplains, and religious leaders are making that adaptation to this situation. Ongoing formation, because including topics such as pastoral communication theology and ICT and its ethical, theological, and pastoral implications. And finally, peer-to-peer knowledge sharing. This would mean organizing workshops, seminars, or other spaces such as this one on ICT for lay pastoral leaders to give support also to that complex communication environment. So I just want to finalize with this a quote that says that empathy is feeling the same emotions that another person experiences and responding in a compassionate way. Thank you very much. My greetings from Ecuador, and I would be pleased to listen some comments or ask